Common Knowledge is brought to you by our friends at Game Grid Midvale, our local game store who puts players first with weekly competitive events, below market pricing, and the best customer service available. Check out their online inventory using the link in our description.
We are also sponsored by inkgaming.com. Use coupon code CCMTG10 at checkout for a 10% discount on all inked gaming supplies and accessories. You can support the show directly through Patreon at patreon.com/common knowledge.
This is the Common Knowledge Podcast. It's not about the cost, it's about the knowledge. Here are your hosts, Brandon Clark and Lawbert.
Hi, welcome to the podcast. This is episode 90 of Common Knowledge. I'm here with Sean and also myself.
Brandon.
Yeah. How do I usually do that intro? That was weird. I just lost my mind for a minute and was like, what do I say?
How do you even breathe? Does our tongue? Does your tongue fit in your mouth? This is the awkward episode of Common Knowledge. Gosh. Everyone just missed out, if you're not watching on YouTube, on Brandon's amazingness.
Alrighty, yeah. Today we have a show for you. It's about Pauper. Pauper is a Magic format for the card game Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, no Yu-Gi-Oh this week. Just straight Magic the Gathering.
Only Magic the Gathering. No Yu-Gi-Oh.
So some accountability, though. Did you play your league this week?
I did. No, I haven't finished it yet. I have 2 more games to play, and then it'll be done.
You dirty Brandon.
Hey, it's not. I got till midnight before the week is over.
Okay. I'll buy it.
Yeah, got time to finish.
You best be doing that. But how you doing in the league?
Good. So I've actually played. This is my second league. So I think this is my second week of my challenge to play a league every week until the new semester of school starts.
Well, that's true because we missed a week. I'm sorry. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. My first week, I played. What did I play? I played Blue Red Delver with Mantle. No, I didn't. Not Delver. The Blue Red Fairies deck. That we covered in our power rankings, and I added in Mantle of Tides, and that deck just wasn't very good.
Oh.
I went 2 and 3. I lost the Mirror twice, but they were playing Tragic Lesson plus Mystic Sanctuary.
Yeah.
And that was really hard to beat.
Yeah, that does seem like it might be better than Hieroglyphic Elimination, maybe? Potentially?
Yep, I think so. I think it's actually, I think Tragic Lesson's a pretty good card.
Yeah.
So that coupled with Mystic Sanctuary, I think it's a really powerful synergy, and it's probably the direction that these blue-based kind of tempo decks should be going. Just really good source of card advantage. Yeah, Mystic Sanctuary is just such a powerful Magic card, and finding good ways to abuse it outside of Deprive is good. And so I think I'm going to try to get that together and do that at some point, play through with Mystic Sanctuary, Tragic Lesson in my deck. It's just a really strong package.
Sweet.
Yeah. And then my second league, the league that I started this week, I'm 3-0, and I'm playing Burn because I decided that I was sick and tired of trying to make hard decisions. So I've been throwing burn spells at people's face.
It sounds like it's been going pretty well. That's usually how my burn leagues go, is just some really positive results.
Yeah. Let's see. I beat Stompy. I beat the Blue-Red Spread, Tragic Lesson, Ninja deck. And then I beat something. Oh, I beat the Mirror. Yeah. So that one just feels more like luck than anything else. Against Stompy, it was kind of just like a race. I won the die roll, went first in game 1, and beat him. Bolted his first creature, hit him with G2 Lava Runner once, and it just was I just outraced him. And then game 2, he was on the play and smushed me into the dirt. And then game 3, I was on the play and outraced him again. So there was that. And then the Tragic Lesson matchup, it really just came down to like in the early turns of development when they're playing like their cantrips and whatnot, you just need to throw like everything you can at them.
Hmm.
And then once they start holding up mana and stuff, you're kind of just like sandbagging spells, looking for an opportunity to get them. Oh, they weren't playing. They were playing a blue-red Scred with Tragic Lesson deck, but it wasn't. It wasn't like the Fairies Ninja package. It was Pieces of the Puzzle with Crash of Horns as the win condition. So that's what
Okay.
they were doing. So basically, like what happened is I would just get their life total as low as I possibly could, and then once they started holding up mana, I just stopped doing anything, and I
Yeah,
would just amass a huge amount of burn, and then they would tap their 5 mana and play Crash of Horns, and I would bolt them, and then they would use the rest of their mana to counterspell my bolt, and then I'd bolt them, fire blast them.
yeah, that seems like an overwhelmingly positive matchup. I haven't played too many times because that hasn't been very popular at the same time I've been playing Burn, but like it's trying to win the game on turn 12 or something like that and just lock you out. And yeah, just sandbagging seems like there's nothing they can do about that.
Yeah, cards like Curse of the Pierce Heart are kind of ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Does like
They can
7 damage.
Yeah, they can only answer that card with Hydroblast. It was so funny. They were at 3 life and I managed to resolve Curse of the Pierce Heart, and I knew what their cards were because of they had something that was like letting me know what cards they had, and I can't remember what that card was. It was like revealing cards and putting it into their hand. Maybe they just cast like 2 Augur Bolus or something. I don't know. Somehow I knew the 2 cards in their hand. It was Dispel, Pieces of the Puzzle. the
There you go.
namesake of the deck that we're talking about. Pieces of the Puzzle. Yeah, so they cast Pieces of the Puzzle and they got they got their cards. They had, and I knew that their hand was a Dispel and a Exclude. So I knew that was their hand. So I knew that like any sorcery based stuff was safe and I couldn't cast creatures or whatever. And I think I just happened to have like 2 lava spikes in my hand and a Curse of the Pierce Heart. And so I like spiked them twice. They went down to 3, and then I played Curse of the Pierce Heart and was like, this seems pretty good. They're at 3. And then they untapped and in their first main phase cast Hydroblast. So my curse only dealt them 1 damage, but
Hydroblast is a big deal. Yeah.
yeah, it was a good draw. It was a very timely draw, but anyway, do you play any magics? Do any things?
Does Hearthstone count?
What?
No, I've this time of year I lose a lot of my motivation. Just I don't know if it's not like severe, but just seasonal depression of just like I just don't feel good in December. That's all there is to it, and I haven't felt like editing or putting together stuff. I think that kind of leads into like why we skipped it a week. We didn't do very good show notes for this topic the first time around. We did the episode and just felt so unhappy with it that we scrapped it, and we are doing it again this week. So take 2 on this, and we just want to make sure that we put out quality, and that's kind of, I think, our secret of staying on the air longer. Like, there's a lot of podcasts. Most podcasts don't last 3 months, and it's over 2 years now. And I think it's because we're not afraid to skip weeks. We do value consistency and getting things out to our listeners, but I'm not ever willing to sacrifice quality within a reasonable extent. So
yeah,
I'm
we're
happy with our
definitely
decision.
in the camp of quality over quantity. You know, I mean, obviously we do everything we can to not miss weeks when we can avoid it. But yeah, our episode last week, it just was. Neither of us were very prepared. We don't think that the show notes that we had were very in depth or well thought out, and the show just kind of felt like a hodgepodge. Between that and like we had to stop every 5 minutes because I had my son banging down the door. My wife has been working a lot of overtime with the holiday season. Like, she like 60-hour work weeks. and so she's always gone Sunday night working, and so yeah. And then last week it was basically just like me and my son home alone, and instead of canceling, I just said, "Oh, it'll be fine," and it it
And
wasn't very fun. We had to, and I think it really threw off our vibe a lot too. Me having to like mute and go take care of him really quick, and then come back and what the heck were we talking about?
yeah,
And so we just both felt better about re-recording it, and I think we're gonna have a much better show lined up for you guys than
yeah.
we would have.
There was like 6 or 7 times when I started like, okay, like here's an example, and I get to the end of it and I'm like, I don't know why I told that. I don't know why I told that or gave that example. So now I'm editing that whole thing out. Like it was a lot of times. Anyway, feel good
Yeah,
about this. Shout out before we get into card of the week. I did play against Colbias Ticklebush, which I love your name. This is not the first time we've shouted you out. You always mention the podcast. I'm always going to shout you out. He killed me while he was playing Blue Delver or Blue Fairies, and I was playing Mill. Not a very positive matchup for me, but I got him within like under 10 cards, so it was a fight. But shout out to that guy; he's always super friendly.
yeah, awesome, cool. Let's get into the card of the week.
Card of the week.
All right, so this week we're going to be talking about Firebrand Archer. I think the reason we chose this card actually is Sean had an exchange on Reddit with someone who had listened, and that person was very adamant about Molten Rain being bad against Tron. One thing that Sean had actually been noticing is Firebrand Archers have been popping up in sideboards of burn decks. And
Right.
after Sean had this conversation, he was thinking, well, maybe this is what those Firebrand Archers are for. So we decided to choose it as our card of the week and talk about it.
Yeah, so Firebrand Archer is a colorless and a red for a 2/1 human archer. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Firebrand Archer deals 1 damage to each opponent. It's kind of similar to Thermo Alchemist in that it's powering up all of your burn spells in a burn deck. This is a little different in that it counts your enchantments and things too. So like not just instants and sorceries, it's any non-creature spell. So there are situations where that's going to matter. Like, say you play a relic or an enchantment, which is not uncommon, then this is going to deal an extra damage where the other one wouldn't. It doesn't automatically deal the damage like Thermo Alchemist does, but Thermo Alchemist will just ping every turn. But if there's no blockers, this is going to do twice as much. Like, it's just going to do 2 damage. So this doesn't see play in main decks of burn decks anymore. It was cut in lieu of either Gitu Lava Runner or
Skewer the Critics.
Skewer the Critics. Yes. So those 2 cards, I think, replaced this one. I don't know which one did it. Sorry. But we recommended Molten Rain, and M. Lovebow was like, please stop recommending that people do this. It's just turning on their Pulse Marasa. So I had to go out and look for, like, what is a better sideboard card. He believed that Smash to Smithereens or Keldon Marauders were fine. I don't think Keldon Marauders good. I don't think that's worth it. It does, like, if it goes to the graveyard, they're gonna be using their Pulse of Marasa anyway. And Smash to Smithereens is okay, but it is also easily fizzleable. And the upside on Molten Rain, I felt like was better than those. Like, so I did disagree, but he had a valid point of it's not perfect. There's room for improvement here, and so I went out and found some lists that were running Firebrand Archer, and I think that's the direction you should go now.
Yeah, Firebrand Archer, we've talked about it before on the cast in recent weeks, but just finding ways to deal damage outside of combat, and if this can resolve, Tron doesn't have much removal at all outside of Din Rovahor being able to bounce this away. And so once this hits the board, this is a source that, like, even if they counter your spell, their decks are full of prohibits, dispels, hydroblasts, the like, and even if they counter your burn spell, you're still going to get a little bit of value out of it.
And you very much do need sideboard cards in that matchup, since like Searing Blaze is terrible. Like,
yeah,
it's so bad. So yeah, Firebrand Archer is, I think, a good little piece of tech.
All right, so that was our card of the week. Should we just jump into our main topic?
Absolutely.
Main topic.
All right, so this week we're talking about synergy versus power. what that means for a deck. And if you're brewing, are you looking for more synergy or are you looking for higher power level? What are the pros and cons of each, and which one could be more beneficial, whatever. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. Sean, do you want to kind of tell us why we're coming up with this topic?
Yeah, so it was just a conversation in the constructed criticism Discord in the Pauper section where DracV was asking, like, when do I put in sub strategies? And like, there's this whole discussion. I'm not going to get into it too much in detail, but it made me come up with the idea of doing a whole episode on synergy and when to use it, when to not, some things to think about when you're brewing. So this is a brewing topic, and we don't do a whole lot of those, but I think this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, we don't do a lot of brewing topics because we're sometimes more geared towards being that competitive focused podcast, but brewing and being competitive aren't mutually exclusive. I mean, I think there's skills that every player should try to develop, being able to brew and being able to tackle new formats, and I think maybe going forward with the shakeups that our format sees now, I don't know if this is going to be the norm, what we saw in 2019 going forward, but if Wizards is planning on thinking about our format and creating cards for us, that certainly means I think we'll get more shakeups. And being able to put on your brewer's cap and look at a format and tackle a new format and create something innovative can give you a huge edge. And so I think this is why we also had so much trouble with this topic. Is on its face, this seems like maybe an easy thing to talk about, but then it's like, it's really deep and really complex. And I think I think it's kind of difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of those things that if you can like figure out, that niche of when should I be looking for synergies? When should I be just going for straight power level in my deck? When can I combine these two things? I think it's going to give you a huge edge as a brewer and just as a competitive player in general. So
even if you're a competitive player and you're playing like a stock list you found online, like most people are like looking at like, this card seems like it's not pulling its weight. What can I put in for this? So like that tuning and trying to find like, can I power this up? Is there different sideboard slots, different like cards 58, 59, 60 in the deck that kind of seem like they're out of place, and should I switch those out? I think this is applicable to that too. So I think everybody has something to learn here.
Definitely. So what is synergy, Sean?
Interaction between cards that produce a greater result than the sum of their separate effects. So card A, card B, like card A does like untaps a creature, card B does something when it taps. So usually the first card is just doing it when it attacks or whatever. And then you can put together some cards, tap it and untap it, and now that card is producing 2 to 3 times as many things, where the untapping creature, like, okay, that's fine for giving something vigilance, but now it's actually producing whatever.
This maybe is a bad example because I think the card I'm thinking of on its own is just powerful, but I think about Ghostly Flicker. Like that card alone on its face isn't like overly powerful when you think about it. It's just like, okay, I'm moving 2 things out of whatever. When you think about how that card was probably designed for limited, as like you get a block and then flicker your 2 things out. And
yeah.
But then in the context of Hopper, where you can combine it with a card like Denrova or Mnemonic Wall, you've created this incredibly powerful synergy. Where on their own, Mnemonic Wall is just an 0-4 that it gets you a little card advantage. Ghostly Flicker is like an interesting combat trick or whatever. But put them together, and you've created a really, really powerful synergy.
Yeah, like Ghostly Flicker I think is a good example of like, that card doesn't do anything on its own, but it's like a pure, like nowadays it's a pure synergy card where you don't play it unless you have ways to abuse it, and then it's the engine, it's the best part of your deck, pretty much.
All right, so where do we start when we're looking for synergies?
Like, just building a deck from scratch, of course, start with the synergy. I add in the power level cards later that are like payoffs or work well with it, because I don't know how many slots I'm going to need. And of course, you want all of the cards in your deck to synergize so that you're getting the most value possible out of everything. like it's a token strategy, you're going to put a bunch of tokens in and payoffs for the tokens before you put in, like just like Boros Bully does, a Monarch card to use those. Like that's a payoff or whatever, but it's not directly synergizing. It's your power level card. So start with a synergy, do as many 4s as possible, and then just start jamming games, right?
Yeah, and I like that you touched on like 4 ups. I think that's really important when you're starting to brew a deck. Is just play things in 4. It's really hard to just like look at a deck and go, okay, that needs to be a 2 of, or this needs to be a 1 of, or whatever. Start with as many 4 ofs as you can possibly play, and start playing those games. And from there, you're going to decide like you're going to play all those games where you draw like 2 copies of this card, and you go, wow, I really don't even need to draw 1 copy of this card in this matchup. And then you're going to play another game, and you're going to have the exact same thing come up. And you're thinking, okay, maybe do I not need this card in my deck? And then you're going to play a game where you're like, holy cow, this was the best card in my deck. And then you think, well, so if it's really good in some places and really bad in other places, you think like, okay, do I relegate this to the sideboard? Or can I start shaving numbers on this card? You can think about going down to 1 or 2 copies or whatever. So I always start with a 4 of whenever I start to brew, and that's kind of the reason why. You just don't know. For all you know, you could start with a card and it just be the best card, and you're like, yeah, I'm glad I put 4 of it in my deck. Or you start with it and it's like the worst, and you start cutting it and cutting it and cutting it down until eventually maybe you just realize this card shouldn't be in your deck list at all, or maybe it needs to get moved to the sideboard. Who knows?
Yeah, we're saying like testing is really the place where most of this work is going to get done, but like knowing things and developing tricks and all that is going to move up your starting point so that less testing needs to be done, and then you're going to progress more quickly through those. Like you're going to learn more and make better changes as you go if you like know about this stuff, research this, or have experience in brewing. So that's not to say like just go play. Why are you even listening to a podcast? Like I think it helps, and like researching this, I had some stuff to think about, and I feel like I learned a little as well.
Yeah. I think another really important point is when you're going for synergy, you need to try to stick to a plan, right?
Yeah,
You
that's
can't
why.
you can't just start going off all these rabbit holes of, I don't know, I have this arcane strategy, but spirits also kind of do cool things with arcane, so I'm going to mesh it all together. And I don't know why I went to Kamigawa block with this, but I did.
Well, it's whatever. We're gonna be pulling from all over the place, and like I think of them in packages. Like I have my mill package, I have my stall package, and then I have my whatever draw package. Like it was just recently when I was brewing. Like I have my draw package. I have as like Fathom Seer, Brainstorm, some cantrips, and like that sub package synergizes with Jace's Erasure because I the more cards I draw. So like I started with the cards I wanted to get to work, and then I worked backwards and like got them to work from there, and then I've added and removed things based like after 50-60 games that didn't work as much or had a better slot that it could be doing. Like, and I had no idea. My first iteration of the deck was 40 cards different. Not 40 cards because the islands all stayed the same, but like it was more than 20 cards different than my final result. But I tried to make all of the cards in the deck start as just mill strategy.
Yeah, I have a story that's kind of the opposite of what you've done, where you stuck to your plan. One of the very first decks I tried to brew as a new Magic player, playing sort of my first standard format. This was during Gate Crash. Up until that point, I was just like casual kitchen table, like didn't know what we were doing. We would try to respond to lands coming into play, like all sorts of nonsense. But I tried to build this Jeskai like control deck with a bunch of creatures in it, and Supreme Verdict and Sphinx's Revelation. So I had all the like Boros Battalion creatures, red and white, and then all my blue control elements. But there was this one creature that had Battalion was like a 3/2 for 4 mana or something, and it was like when it and 3 other creatures attacks, all your creatures get indestructible, I think. So my thought process was I attack and all my things get indestructible, and then I cast Supreme Verdict. But then
Oh,
I also like had all these counter spells in my hand and Sphinx's Revelation. And so you get into this scenario where I'm like, well, I want to cast creatures so I can get Battalion when I attack, but I also want to hold up counter spells and I want to cast Sphinx's Revelations and it's like, well, my opponent's already overrun me and my creatures are all like big dirtly 3, 4, 5 drops. I guess I'm casting Supreme Verdict and killing my combat medic or whatever it was called, not getting Battalion.
I think
And
that's
so
right.
it's like a
Frontline
total just
medic.
frontline medic. There you go. It was just a total clash of synergy where, I just needed to go one way or the other. I needed to be a control deck or I needed to be a weird Boros, aggro mid-range deck.
Mm.
And instead I tried to like mash them together because in my mind, magical Christmas land of like, I'm going to attack with my creatures and my opponent's not going to block because they're all indestructible. And I'm going to get in a ton of damage and then I'm going to cast Supreme Verdict anyway. And then I'm just going to win.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's another. So maybe there are like 2 lessons from this story. One is stick to your plan, identify your plan, stick to it. Maybe the other is try to figure out if the synergy you have in your head is magical Christmas land. Because getting Battalion with all my creatures and then casting Supreme Verdict, that's magical Christmas land. It didn't happen. I just remember really loving these Boros Battalion creatures. Like there was like a 4-drop angel that when it got Battalion, I think Lightning Helixed something.
Yeah.
So then at that point too, it was like, well, if I'm Lightning Helixing something with my big angel that's indestructible, why do I need to cast Supreme Verdict? It was
Yeah.
just such a fun concept, but stick to your game plan and then try to figure out if this synergy that you're envisioning is magical Christmas land or if this is actually something that you can feasibly pull off in a game when your opponent is interacting and trying to kill you.
I have some notes on like when do I add cards that are outside of my original synergy. Of course, you start with a bunch of cards that fall within it, and then I think most strategies don't have a full 40 card. These are just the best 40 cards that do X. Like going back to mill again, because that's what I've been brewing. How many good mill cards are there? Like, you'd be surprised how few of them there are in Pauper. Like, you've got 7 good ones. So you fill your deck with 7, and then the rest of it, you got to figure out what you're going to do. So that sub-strategy, like that's where you started putting in sub-strategies, and you want it to work as well with your original one as possible. But maybe if there's not a good one that works with mill a lot of the time. So as my sub-strategy, I'm going to just do, or not, it's not even a sub-strategy, it's just, I'm going to fill these with powerful cards. I know, Ponder, Preordain, Brainstorm, some draw spells, and some blue stall cards, counterspell, are going to be the best thing I can possibly be doing in that slot. And a lot of the time, that will detract from the attention that your opponent can give to your main strategy. I have an example written here of, say you're playing some green, whatever other color deck, and you're finding that you put a decent amount of cards in the graveyard, just play Hooting Mandrels. Like, no, it's probably not doing anything special with your synergy, like your token strategy. I'm making all these little guys, but token creators, those cards just go into the graveyard and the guys stay on the field, so maybe I'll just get rid of all those cards in the graveyard and play myself a Hooting Mandrels. Now I have to deal with a 4/4, I've paid 1 mana for it. Just a powerful big effect that's going to help you win the game.
Yeah, I think another really prime example of this is Delver of Secrets in the Is It Blitz archetype. The first strategy means that you're already just playing tons of instants and sorceries anyway to trigger Kiln Fiend and Cyclops, so your Delver's already very likely to flip. But it's just like a super solid threat that now your opponent has to try to answer, which just means less resources going towards answering your other big payoffs.
Right. I think that's why the cards that we deem as the best cards in Pauper get that ranking, is because they require such little deck building cost that when you reach for a powerful card, they just fit. Like Hooting Mandrill Garmog Angler and Seeker of the Way. All that Seeker of the Way needs is for you to be playing, like much like Delver of Secrets, just a lot of non-creature spells. And as long as you're casting spells, and that's going along with your main strategy, whoops, you've got a 5/5 lifelinker swing in, and with a possibility of growing mid-combat. Like, that's why you're seeing Seeker of the Way so much. It's just good. Like, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about powerful cards, is they're not like completely outside of your deck. Like, they still synergize with it. Like, I'm just not gonna put a big beater in my mill deck for no reason. Like, it has a purpose of like blocking or whatever. Does that make
You're not
sense?
going to splash green for Colossal Dreadmaw, right? Even though that's the best creature in Pauper.
Well, I might now.
Giving Sean all the good ideas. No, but I mean, I think this brings up a really good point where sometimes you do just want to mesh the two, right? You don't necessarily want to be fully focused on one or the other. Sometimes you can find very powerful cards within your synergy to an extent. Hooting Mandrills, if you're filling your graveyard, Delve takes advantage of those cards that you're not using in that graveyard anymore and lets you play a really undercosted big creature. Seeker of the Way, you have removal spells, you have Lightning Bolt in your deck. Seeker of the Way is probably a good card for you.
Yeah, and that's a good place to like jump into one of those sub strategies. Like, I have those extra slots. I need it to be a powerful thing. Back to the token strategy. If I'm trying to play a whole bunch of tokens, I'm probably playing a whole bunch of non-creature spells. Maybe a Firebrand Archer or something could start something. Like, okay, now my deck has this ability to do non-combat damage, while at the same time it's a creature, so my creature strategy, it's like got a little bit of synergy there. It synergizes with all of the spells I was going to play anyway, and then this is the deck that Brad was originally asking about, and then he put Snake Umbra on the Firebrand Archer, and Snake Umbra is a totem armor, gives some pluses that I don't really care about. And every time your creature deals any damage, just it doesn't matter about combat or non-combat, you're going to draw a card. So now he's got token strategy, he's got this pinger strategy with the potential of just drawing tons and tons of cards. It becomes difficult to balance, like, okay, now my sub-strategy needs support as well, and you have to find the balance there. Maybe there's not enough for both, and you're just better off playing some big boys. Speaking of balancing, though, I don't think your synergy, sometimes your synergy can take precedence over it. Like, Elves is a good example of it, but you do still need your balance of creature spells and payoffs and removal spells, interaction, consistency, things like cantrips. Like, yeah, you want to make all of your cards synergize, but you still need to play a game of Magic where your opponents are doing powerful things and trying to interact with you. So maybe Apostle's Blessing doesn't mesh with your strategy. It's not doing anything special, but it's going to save your creature, and that makes it worth it.
Yeah, I think Elves was actually a really good example for kind of the opposite scenario where your synergy is so strong that you don't want to dilute it with anything other than what your synergy is. In Elves, you just can't really afford to draw anything other than an elf or, one of your lead the Stampede effects. And so that's why the deck is, 12 lands, 40 elves, like some lead Stampedes and Winding Ways or Distant Melodies, whichever way you're going with that, because you just can't afford to dilute the deck. What you're doing is so powerful on its own that in a lot of cases, it doesn't matter what your opponent's doing. And you're just kind of like, well, if you interact with me, but the odds are you're not going to, and I'm going to do my thing and beat you. And then in sideboarding, I can try to figure that out. I can work those kinks out there.
Yeah, and before you write in, I know people play Viridian Longbow and things like that to interact with their opponent, and no, that's not going towards your elf strategy, but that's, I think...
Deck.
Sorry, what?
Those aren't really main deck, though.
A lot of people do. I mean, the Maverick Girl just wrote an article Like, I don't know if she's done writing it. It's going to be like a 4-week article just on elves, like the ultimate elves primer, and her main deck had a Viridian Longbow in it. So some people
Oh,
do.
oh, I totally wasn't registering that card. I was thinking of the elf that taps and pings flyers.
Oh, Scattershot Archer.
I don't know why my mind went to Scattershot Archer when you said Viridian Longbow. But no, yeah, you're right. So I think another major concern when trying to look at going for synergy versus just straight power is looking at the disruption available in the format. You know, how interactive can they be? How easy it is to disrupt what your synergy is doing. Those are some things that you kind of need to look at. And if what your synergy is isn't powerful enough to withstand, you know, the removal or the counter magic or whatever of your format, then maybe that is kind of an inkling that maybe you should go towards the more raw power side of it, where all your cards kind of individually are strong, and it doesn't necessarily matter that they destroy one.
Right, yeah. And redundancy can help with that. Like, I've got a whole section coming up of like when you should just call it and just be like, this isn't worth it. I can't make this work. They haven't printed enough cards that support it. But the example I have here is that you play Night Sky Mimic, which is a colorless and a hybrid white-black for a 2/1 shapeshifter that says whenever you play a spell that's both white and black, Night Sky Mimic becomes a 4/4 and gains flying until end of turn. So this is just a synergy card. That's how I see it. Of you have to build your deck. There's deck building costs around this. Of you got to play a whole bunch of hybrid white black cards, or just multicolor white black cards. The card pool is really small for specifically those types of cards. So pretty quickly you end up playing some pretty subpar things. First off, like if your Night Sky Mimic is removed, or do you have a plan to stop that removal in protection spells or discard? Like, of course, you're playing Castigate because it's going to be the best card in white-black, but then past that, things still will go wrong, and you can't just be left with a bunch of like really subpar like enchantments or whatever. Like, I know a lot of the time people try to brew exactly that deck and they put in Nip Gwillian, which is a single hybrid black-white mana for a 1/1 with lifelink. So a 1/1 with lifelink isn't that strong. And a lot of the time you're going to be wishing that you had just like, okay, well, my Night Sky Mimics aren't going to be as big. A 2/1 maybe is fine. I really would have rather have drawn a Gurmag Angler here. Like, you took synergy to a level where it wasn't worth it. You put in cards that were very subpar, and if you don't draw your Night Sky Mimic at all, or it's gone, what are you left with? You're left with, like, you're top decking just worse cards than your opponent. So you gotta keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think the Gurmag Angler is a perfect example of sort of rate, the kind of rate that you want to get out of your synergies. And when you think that your Gurmag Angler at a certain point in the game, not immediately on turn one, but at a certain point in the game, is a 1-mana 5/5 that has very little deck building cost. Whereas the synergy that you're talking about here, you're working really, really hard to get that 4/4 with flying. You know, I kind of look at I want to look at a lot of things if I'm comparing threats that can go into my black deck over Gurmag Angler, and it's how important is that I can play this creature on like turn 1, 2, or 3 consistently, and how powerful and how impactful is that going to be on the game. And if the answer is, well, those things just aren't that important, it's like, well, why am I not just playing Gurmag Angler? Because that card is just so rawly powerful on its face that, well, why am I going to make all these, jump through all these hoops to try to get a creature or something that's almost as powerful as Gurmag Angler when I could just play Gurmag Angler for 0 cost?
Yeah, and the rest of the cards in your deck, you can just go for a different strategy or a different synergy, or just have them be more powerful in general. I think that's a good example of like, maybe you should shelve your idea, come back to it. Like if there's ever like I don't know what would make that strategy playable. Maybe we should not talk about that one anymore, but some repeatable thing that really is great with a multicolored strategy.
I mean, I think, I don't know, a really good example in Pauper currently of this is, I think, Tireless Tribe combo, where we were able to figure out this engine powered by Gush, right? Of being able to Gush and have Tireless Tribe, and then you just need to assemble the 2-card combo of Tireless Tribe plus Inside Out. And after Gush got banned, I think I myself and a lot of other people just believe Tribe combo was dead, right? For a long
Mhm.
time. And I think that's very clearly not the case. It's certainly, I don't believe, tier 1,
Yeah.
but it's still a deck. People have found ways to make that work again.
Yeah, like some of the reasons I have written here of like when you should maybe abandon playing a strategy is there enough redundant pieces that you're going to find what you need consistently? And Tireless Tribe, they put blue in it and so many cantrips that they're able to just dig until they find it, and it makes it worth it since it is resilient. You can play a Tireless Tribe and then discard cards and pump up its toughness so it's resilient to burn spells to the point where like people know just don't cast them unless they're going for the combo. And then the payoff is you immediately win the game. There's not like something else that you can just be like, I'll just play this other thing where I immediately win the game. No, Tireless Tribe is unique like that, that the synergy between 2 cards is so powerful that the entire deck is just devoted to making that work. At the same time, they do go for some just power level choices of I'm going to put Seeker of the Way in my deck because all of those same reasons that you always play Seeker of the Way. I just have lots of non-creature spells that I'm casting, and this guy just ends up being a 7/7.
Yeah, I just attack you for lots and you die because you are trying to play around beating this really weird, obscure combo, and you're not concerning yourself about a creature, a 2/2 for 2. That's just not on your radar, and it's just going to get you, especially in post-board games. We do see that a lot in this format with our synergy decks, and I think that has one to do with the nature of our format, cards being slightly underpowered, and so when a new synergy comes out in a set, we're kind of getting the lower end of it. I mean, not obviously not in all cases. In some cases, we got the most powerful versions of those cards, like Treasure Cruise, or
Yeah.
that's generally not the case. And so you do see a lot of decks where a deck like Tireless Tribe, where you would think that they'd want to just be as redundant as possible and do everything to try and find Tribe plus Inside Out, but they're playing Seeker of the Way just because that card is so powerful, and there's just not enough to go deep enough on Tireless Tribe that you're playing some pretty bad cards to fill in those slots, and it's just okay to play Tireless Tribe. So you see that a lot in our format, and I think that also just kind of leads us into our next segment.
Yeah, so the last thing we're going to do is we're just going to go through a Boros bully list and talk about how all of the cards fit into this synergy power level dynamic. We're going to find not everything fits cleanly into one or the other, but that also means that it's more nuanced, and I feel like we're going to learn more.
So we're going to play a fun little game of power or synergy. We're going to be looking through this deck list, which took second place at the challenge on December 8th. And we're going to be going through each card choice. We chose this deck list specifically because we think Boros Bully is the perfect example of a deck that's like in the middle of that Venn diagram of synergy and power, where there's a lot of synergy happening in this deck, but there are a lot of cards that are in this deck just based on their raw power level in the format. So we're going to go through and try to identify where each card in the deck falls and sort of what its place is, what it's doing, if it's helping further the synergy or if this is just strictly there because it's strong. And like you said, there are going to be some things that fall in the middle.
But before that, Wizards has updated their terms and conditions, so we're going to read those, of course, so that we know our rights.
Oh, I immediately pressed X.
What? Okay.
All right, Sean, are you ready for synergy or power?
Absolutely, neighbor.
All right, very first card, Guardian of the Guild Pack. Synergy or power?
So this is a payoff card that pretty much falls in the power realm. Like, it's got the tiny bit of synergy that Rally the Peasants affects it, and the next card is Palace Sentinels, so it's a fantastic blocker for that. And I guess it can also take back your Palace Sentinel's Monarch. So it fits in the deck. It has different roles. It's, since there's a lot of other cards in the deck, it does more than it's just a 2/3 that's unkillable. But mostly, it's not like adding to those synergies for the most part. So I think it's just a power level pick.
Definitely, I agree. Power level pick. You already mentioned it, but next card, Palace Sentinels, Synergy or Power.
I think on the spectrum of power level and synergy, this is more towards it's definitely leaning power, but it has the synergy of you're playing a whole bunch of token strategies. Like the main strategies in this are tokens and discard, things that synergize with your faithless lootings and stuff. But Palace Sentinels is a payoff card for both of those. Since you have a lot of blockers, you're going to draw more cards. Since you are discarding things with faithless looting that include prismatic strands, you're going to be keeping that Monarch a lot more often. And so I think it leans more power, but it also has some definite synergies. So I think it's close to the middle.
Yeah, for sure. And then this next card, I don't think is deviating at all. So far, we've seen just 3 cards with just power level. Next card is Seeker of the Way. I'm going to ask myself, Brandon, synergy or power? And the answer is power. Obviously, there is the synergy of when you cast Rally the Peasants, this gets lifelink, and your deck's full of lightning bolts and stuff. So there's that synergy there. But this card is just the best white 2-drop in the format, right?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of deck building costs, so I think that makes it more of a power pick.
Yeah, and what about the power level of this next card? I mean, just absolute popper powerhouse Squadron Hawk. Am I right?
Squadron Hawk being the colorless and a white for a 1/1 flying bird creature. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for up to 3 cards named Squadron Hawk, reveal them, and then put them into your hand and shuffle your library. So power level, you're spending 2 mana for a 1/1 flyer, put a bunch of other cards in your hand. It's completely a synergy pick. It's really good with faithless looting because you get to throw away those garbage birds and replace them with actually good cards. You can tell I don't like this card a whole bunch, but it does fit in the list. It does play its role, but alone, yeah, it's not great. It's just really overcosted.
Yeah, 2 mana 1/1. It's just not very powerful in this format. You really don't want this thing just chump blocking. It's kind of just like it just finds a squadron of chump blockers sometimes, and that's the reason you don't really see it played very often. Really, it fits in this deck list because just having a lot of flying creatures synergizes with Rally the Peasants. Just having a good stream of creatures you can play and then cast Rally with is great. And like you said, I think Faithless Looting is the biggest synergy this card gives you. It turns Faithless Looting into like Brainstorm or something.
Yeah, if they end up coming on the field, like, you do have Rally the Peasants to capitalize on that. I'll ask you this next one. So you each take a couple of these. Synergy of power level on Thraben Inspector, a 4 of.
I put this card in the middle. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. I think that it's really easy to put all of the creatures in this deck in the middle because Rally the Peasants, but I think that's just cheating. So I'm going to say power level on this card. At 1/2 for white, when Thraben Inspector enters the battlefield, investigate. So you get that colorless clue token that you can sack to draw cards. This card, I think, is in this deck more for the power level of it. It's just a really good 1-drop. It blocks really efficiently on the ground. It replaces itself. In Boros Monarch, maybe it's more synergy based because you get that, you have a target to bounce with your core Skyfisher now. You can bounce Thraben Inspector. Not to mention the artifact that you get out of the clue turns on Galvanic Blast. So there's a lot more little synergies that you get out of Thraben Inspector. Whereas this deck, I think it is more just a raw power level pick. It's just such a good creature. And I mean, like I said, when you're playing with Rally the Peasants, you kind of can just choose the best creatures to put in your deck because at the end of the day, just playing creatures makes Rally the Peasants better. And so you don't really need to fill your deck with very many Squadron Hawk-esque cards. You can just focus on playing some of the best, most efficient cards in that slot.
I think that's why we chose this list of it's the perfect mix of synergy or power. It just chose all the most powerful cards in and put them together in a way that synergizes to make them even better. Like, you don't want to make a crappy card good, you want to make a good card better. That you'll end up most of the time with a better result.
Next card, Sean. Battle Screech. Synergy or power.
So Battle Screech is, of course, a very, very powerful card, but it's synergizing with most of the cards in your deck. It's blocking for Palace Sentinels, it's triggering your Seeker of the Way, you get 4 times as much bonuses off of Rally the Peasants, and you can discard it to Faithless Looting to save on some mana. So this is frequently a card that people put in their deck just based on the raw power level, but this has built its deck around it, and so I think it's a synergy card here.
I agree. Cathartic Reunion. 1 in a red. As an additional cost to cast Cathartic Reunion, discard 2 cards to draw 3 cards. Synergy or power?
This is definitely a synergy card. By itself, it's pretty powerful to, like, discard some stuff, refill your hand with some better stuff, but the risk is super high. This, I think, the deck has synergized with it in that if you discard some cards that have flashback, you're not down quite so many, and then the upside is that you get double prizes, basically, with drawing all those cards, using all the stuff you put in your graveyard. So I'm putting this in the synergy camp.
Yeah, this is definitely in the synergy camp. Really, the only way this card gets powerful is if you are dumping those flashback spells, because on its face, it's just 2 mana to be at card parity.
Yeah.
Not a lot of power going on, but your deck is full of Battle Screeches, Faithless Lootings, like all these great flashback spells, and Squadron Hawks.
Yeah. The next one is Faithless Looting, synergy or power.
Definitely synergy, but this is one of those spells that is just very powerful. The synergies that it enables, it's really powerful. The rate on it is really, really high. 1 mana with a flashback cost of 2 in a red. It's very efficient. Normally, when you're casting Faithless Looting, you're down a card because you're casting Faithless Looting itself. Then you're drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards. So you're not even using it as a cantrip, so it doesn't even replace itself. But what makes it so powerful is the fact that it's only 1 mana, and the fact that you can just fill your deck with Battle Screeches and the like. Basically the same conversation we just had with Cathartic Reunion, just with a card that has very little downside.
And freaking flashback. So it synergizes with itself.
Yeah, that's true. Even if you top deck this and have no other cards in hand, unlike Cathartic Reunion, you can cast the Faithless Looting. You have to discard those cards right away, but when you have Prismatic Strands and Battle Screech in your deck, maybe that means you're getting a spell that turn that you would have gotten otherwise. So, really powerful, but definitely synergy. This isn't a card that I would just put into any deck. Like, I certainly wouldn't play this in the Boros Monarch version of this deck, but Faithless Looting, very powerful, very synergy. Much wow.
Give me the next one, it's easy.
All right, Sean, Flame Slash, synergy or power?
Power. I feel like there's not much to go into here. Like, any non-creature spell would synergize with Seeker of the Way, just because that's how Seeker of the Way do. But it's in place of Firebolt, actually. Firebolt is a more synergistic card, but they ended up putting in Flame Slash because it's just cheaper and will remove larger creatures. So they just chose this one just based off of its stats.
Yeah, kill Stonehorn Dignitary.
Heck yeah.
Boom. Get out of here, kid.
Next one. I'm going to give this to you. It is an Electrickery. Synergy or power?
Electrickery is power. This card doesn't really do anything with the rest of the deck. The only synergy it really enables is Seeker of the Way. But Electrickery is a single red mana for an instant, deals 1 damage to target creature you don't control, and it overloads for 1 in a red and replaces the word 1 target with each. So each creature you don't control. This is exceptionally powerful in a format full of cards like Battle Screech and Spellstutter Sprite and all those things. This card is just the rate it has for what it does. I don't think there's quite anything as efficient in the format in terms of like a board wipe effect. 2 mana, wipe your opponent's board.
Yeah.
All right, sure. Lightning Bolt, synergy or power?
Again, this is I think in here just based on power. Also, like we mentioned earlier, the balance of removal spells versus creature spells versus enablers, whatever. This deck just does need a lot of removal spells to keep up and to be competitive. So they just chose the most powerful removal spells that they could find. So they put Lightning Bolt in the deck. You've got the next one. It is 4 copies of Prismatic Strands.
Prismatic Strands. 2 and a white instant. Prevent all damage that sorcerers of the color of your choice would deal this turn. Has flashback, tap, and untapped white creature you control. Obviously, this card is on the synergy end of the spectrum, but it's also one of those cards that's so powerful that even in the regular Boros Monarch versions of this deck, they will have copies of Prismatic Strands. Not in these numbers, and they're certainly not as synergistic in that deck, but still very, very powerful. Just being able to protect your Monarch when all you need to do is untap a single white creature is pretty powerful. Obviously has those great synergies with Faithless Looting, Cathartic Reunion, turns on Seeker the Way. Like if you attack with your Seeker the Way, and they don't see Prismatic Strands coming, and they block, and you get to just blow them out by giving that buff to your Seeker of the Way, and then saying the color of their creature, and just your Seeker of the Way just eats it. Just so much gravy, so much good stuff you can do with this card in this deck. So definitely falls in the middle of the Venn diagram, and it's just really high on both those metrics. Like it's very, very synergistic with the deck and very powerful.
Yeah, it's like you said, one of those cards that people put in their deck based on the power level as a 1 or a 2 of, but then this deck gets to play 4 of a powerful card because they built their deck around it.
Next card. This is, I don't know. This is to me the defining card of the deck.
Yeah.
You see Red Peasants, you know it's Bully. I mean, I guess you could say like Squadron Hawk and stuff are too, and like, but Rally the Peasants is really the reason that this deck is a thing. So 2 and a white, creatures you can control get +2/+0 until end of turn. It's an instant, has flashback for 2 and a red. Sean, synergy or power?
Completely synergy. The whole token aspect of this deck, like the tokens wouldn't be synergizing in any real special way. Like, I guess they'd be working with Palace Sentinels, and since the battle screeches are non creatures, they would still have some. But the reason you want all of these small creatures is because Rally the Peasants is in your deck, and they synergize with each other. So that I feel like this is the payoff for your tokens package.
I mean, this is sort of the reason that you're, like you said, playing cards like Squadron Hawk. It's the payoff. It's the synergy that you're building your deck around. This go wide strategy and then make my creatures big, Alpha Strike, attack, win.
So
and it has flashback, so
it does have flashback. Yeah.
More reason to play Faithless Looting.
When you're building a deck, you're looking for overlap on synergies and tricks like that. Like, the fact that this has flashback for a red means like, okay, maybe this is worth it to play a hybrid red deck over just your mono white token strategy where I can be playing something that gives my creatures +2/+2. Forget what the name of that card is. But this has an overlap with another strategy that's very, very good. Like, you get to have a better excuse to play Faithless Looting and Cathartic Reunion, and that just ends up synergizing with your Prismatic Strands, and like all of it feeds off each other, and you end up with a deck that has some of the most powerful spells that are amplified by this synergy. Do you want to take the last card? I'll give it to you. So we have 2 copies of Journey to Nowhere, synergy or power.
Power.
Yep, this does nothing with anything else, really. I guess it's got the Seeker of the Way thing, which is cheating, because, like, look, Seeker of the Way is, like, it's just cheating. It adds synergy to cards that are, like, has nothing to do with anything. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, it works.
Yeah, Seeker of the Way just says play the cards in your deck that you want to play anyway, and then attack with a big lifelink creature.
Yeah.
Have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to go through any of the lands or anything. I think we're done.
Mountain synergizes all your red spells, and the generic costs in your white spells, and then synergizes with all your white spells and the generic cost in Cathartic Reunion. as well as the generic cost in the flashback on Rally the Peasants. And
Get outta
once
here.
card credits you a life, so it synergizes with Seeker the Way to help you not die to birth. Blah.
Ready to call it?
End times.
All right, well, that's the show. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Common Knowledge. Again, big thank you to all of our great sponsors at inkgaming.com and GameGrid Midvale. Check out their online store in the link below, and don't forget about that coupon code CCMTG10, good for a 10% discount on all Ink Gaming supplies and accessories. You can find the show on PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructed Criticism YouTube channel. You can also send us an email if you'd like to at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. We love your emails. We love reading them. You can find the show on Twitter at CK Podcast MTG, as well as our ever-growing Facebook group, Common Knowledge. And Sean, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Lobbert8, that is Lobbert and the number 8, as well as YouTube. You can find me if you just search for Lobbert. I have videos of me playing Pauper, usually Pauper Leagues there, so check that out.
Boom. And you can find me also on Twitter at bclark_CK. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye forever.